Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. We are looking at 40 questions that God asked to people that have lived throughout the ages. And we started in the book of Genesis, and we are now in the book of Exodus. We're on day 13, and we're looking at the life of Moses. So if you have a Bible, turn to Exodus chapter 4, and I'll tell you a little bit of the background because we're going rather brief on these. Moses was a descendant of Hebrews, and the Hebrews were in slavery in Egypt. Egypt is the major superpower at the time, and Moses is as a baby, his parents helped him to escape being slaughtered because the Egyptians thought that the Hebrews were going to become too numerous, so they were killing the male children that were born. Moses' parents hid him in a basket and floated him in the Nile River. And what happened through God's providence is that Pharaoh's daughter uh, found him and raised Moses. So Moses was raised as an Egyptian, basically, and as a young person growing up in the palace, he learned the ways of the Egyptians, but he knew he was a Hebrew. And one day he saw a Hebrew uh, arguing with an Egyptian, and probably wasn't too much of an argument because they were slaves. The Egyptian was beating the Hebrew. Okay, brutal slavery. And Moses looked around, nobody was looking, and he killed the Egyptian. Some believe that Moses was trained in warfare as one of the Pharaoh's, people in his household. So killed the Egyptian, and then Pharaoh wanted to kill Moses. So Moses fled into the land of Midian, and he found a very wise Midianite, and those individuals would do a lot of nomadic, herding and things like that. So Moses grew up in Jethro's household in his later adult years. And so one day he was out shepherding, and he looked up and he saw a fire on a bush, but the bush was not being consumed. So he went to go see this sight, and God spoke to Moses there. He drew him up to the mountain for this particular reason, I believe. And God talked to Moses and told Moses he wanted him to go back to Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let God's people go, the Hebrews. All right. So this is kind of where we are. Moses is talking to God, and he's asking some simple questions. In chapter 4, verse 1, Moses says, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord has not appeared to you?'" Okay, so Moses is asking a great question. And again, his question is not the focus of the message. We're looking at God's questions. What this is setting the stage. Moses is like the average person. I believe in God. I have a relationship with God. I want to tell someone else about God. What if they don't believe me? And here's God's answer to that. Um, God asked, the Lord said to him, this is verse 2, "What is that in your hand?" So that's the question today. What is that in your hand? So let's see what was in his hand. Moses answered, "A staff." And the Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back to a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Now, this may seem a little bit strange, maybe even bizarre to the average person. Why in the world would God uh, turn something into a snake? All right, so let's not focus on that just yet. Let's take a look at the circumstance. Moses, who was a murderer, had to go back to Egypt, go to basically the king, and say, "Hey, let God's people go." That wasn't going to fly. First of all, the Egyptians had multiple gods, lots of different gods. You could research that on your own time. That is one of the things of the Bible that you could definitely find pictures and things of that of to get more clarity through secular sources. and they had lots of gods. So to say our God says let go, the Pharaoh wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to. He would say his rebuttal would be, "You all are slaves. You claim to have this one God. Your God has you in slavery." No, was essentially what it was going to be. Is there was an economic reason too. The slaves were free labor. Okay, it was an evil thing to do, but that's what the Egyptians did. So God gave Moses something very practical, but he didn't go tell Moses to go off the mountain and find something else. Moses was a shepherd, and like a good shepherd, he had a staff in his hand. And God said, um, "What have you got? What's that in your hand?" So there's a whole lot that we can glean from this, but the first thing we should glean, that I'm asking us to think about at least, is the fact that God is asking Moses, "What do you have? What do you have?" He's asking us that. What do you have? What do I have? Not what do you want? What does someone else have? What do you have? And if we do a little bit of research, we would understand that the Egyptians were very superstitious, and they were good at all kinds of magic arts. They were actually excellent at that, and so they had their own magicians. And so Pharaoh was going to be speaking their language, and the Hebrews also were used to seeing the Egyptians do these things. And so, Moses was going to take the staff that he had and not be a false magician. He was actually going to do something that only God can do. He was actually doing a miracle. There's a big difference. Magicians do sleight of hand, and they do things that are, smoke and mirrors and sleight of hand, eye trickery, things like that. Even today, there's lots of different things that magicians do that are very amazing things to see. But the Egyptians were that on steroids. So God essentially showed Moses that I will bless you and help you to do the task at hand with what you've got. You don't have to build anything like Noah did. He told Noah to build an ark. You don't have to go anywhere that you're not unfamiliar with, like Abraham. He told him to go to a land that he had not seen. He's telling Moses to just go into Egypt, a place where he'd already been, back to where you've already been, and take the what you got. And so, what about us today? What do you have? Okay, so you may say, I believe in God and I want to do X, whatever X is. I want to go into the military, or I want to leave the military and be a civilian, or I want a husband or a wife, or I want to, I need a car or a job or whatever it may be. God's asking us, what do you have? It may be, what do you have in your hand? What do you have in your pocket? What education do you have? What book do you have on your shelf? What app do you have on your phone? You never know what God might use to be able to help me or you to do the task that He has for us in the earth. When the war kicked off in 2004, God asked me, "What do I have?" And I looked, and I had everything that a chaplain needs. I had a college degree. I had a Master of Divinity. I had 5 years pastoral experience. I was under the age of 39. All of the things that the Army needed, I had. And so and I had the only thing I didn't have was a faith group endorser, and the Lord helped me to do that through my old pastor, Pastor Emil Hawkins, who at that time was a captain in the Air National Guard, or major maybe back then. And so I was able to go through my faith group endorser through a man named Jim Ammerman, a retired colonel, through chaplaincy of Full Gospel churches. And Chaplain Ammerman was the faith group endorser for my Pentecostal background. We were a good fit. And so he signed off on me. The Army said, that's the last thing you need. And into the Army I went, right? And so I've been telling, people about the gospel in the military context since April of 2004, when I finished the basic course. So that's a part of my testimony. What's your testimony? What's your future testimony? What's God telling me right now? What have you got? I don't have multi-million-dollar ministries where I can have a big truck pull up and film me like I saw them do when I was at Fort Hood for a movie that they filmed there when we were in First Cav. I don't have those assets, but what do I have? I got a cell phone, I got a YouTube account, and I got my Bible right here, so I'm using what I got. What do you have? All right. So let God use you with what you have. Ask that question, what do I have? Because that's what God's asking you. What's that in your hand? What's that in your pocket? What's that in your bank account? What's that you want to give? What's that fill in the blank? All right. So meditate on that and don't focus and look on the other side of the fence saying, I wish I had what that person has. No, look at what you have and use what you got, and God will give you more, just like he did Moses and the Israelites. All right. Have a great day.